President Trump rallying supporters ahead of the midterms just 37 days from now. Voters to decide who will win control of the House and Senate. And the outcome may hinge on what happens this week in Brett Kavanaugh's Supreme Court confirmation fight. Let's bring in Sherry Jacobus, a political consultant and president of Capital Strategy, Scott Bolden, former chair of the National Bar Association's PAC, Kevin Cirilli, chief Washington correspondent for Bloomberg TV, Grace Rao, political reporter for New York One. Kevin Cirilli now wearing specs for us today. And maybe it's one of those days, but quickly to you, my friend, what do you make of where the winds are blowing now, right? 37 days. We just spent a full week talking about nothing but the Supreme Court, and another week, one might guess, also the headline, not necessarily good, some might say, for one party or the other.
Richard, I think that's a great point. And look, President Trump campaigning in West Virginia in a state that candidate Donald Trump carried by 42, count it, 42 percentage points. And this, of course, is in the same state where Senator Joe Manchin, a centrist Democrat from West Virginia, is in a tough re-election battle. And I think that's where this gets really interesting, is everyone's going to have to wait to see what exactly the FBI investigation yields. And then people are going to have to make up their minds. But this is going to be a tough vote for senators like Senator Manchin, Senators Collins, Murkowski, and the likes of them, but for very different reasons, I think, all across the country.
Grace, you and I were talking about this. I think there's, I was counting, there's some 6 states that have already started in-person absentee voting, which means some of this is already baked in. So whatever's going to happen the next week, it's too late, Jake, right?
Right. Well, I mean, the contours of this fight, though, are already clear to the public. But in New Jersey, which is not far from where we are right now, they started voting on September 22nd. So people have been casting their ballots there in races long before they heard the testimony of Kavanaugh and his accuser. And so they are having to make up their minds beforehand. But I think that they know the contours of this fight. But as Kevin was saying, there's still a big question mark over what happens next. We don't know what the FBI investigation is going to yield. And that additional week that they are spending looking into these allegations is another week in which additional allegations may surface. And we may hear, if it's not allegations, we may hear more public statements from people who went to school with Brett Kavanaugh, high school, college, who may have stories about his drinking, his partying, that may undercut some of the testimony that he delivered before the Senate Judiciary Committee. So there is a lot that can go on over the next week, and people are going to be making decisions. Some may decide to hold off until they know how this all shakes out.
Okay, what we're watching, of course, here, Sherry, are polls, at least for now. That's all we've got. And when you look at the Cook Political Report, right, that's one example in terms of how they've moved 4 Senate seats into the toss-up space. We have, of course, the balance of power in the House as well. Many are saying it's going to go left. But when you're talking about this topic of Brett Kavanaugh, is it better than talking about the Mueller investigation, right? Because that was our topic of du jour for weeks upon weeks. This might be better for Republicans.
Well, I'm not so sure about that, because even before the Kavanaugh hearings, the Morning Consult poll showed that Kavanaugh's support among Republican women had plummeted 18 points. That should send all the Republicans into a panic, because if you're a woman still supporting Trump at this point, or his agenda or anything he's doing, you're pretty hardcore. So to have 18% drop in support for Kavanaugh among Republican women, which dropped the entire support by 11 points, and this again was before the hearing. I think this could get a lot worse for Republicans. We know that there's some funny business going on with this investigation, with this FBI investigation, that Don McGahn has limited it so that it's going to be very difficult to get any evidence that's going to matter. If the American people, particularly women, start catching on to that, I think it could be a big problem. Men in general, I think, underestimate the impact of this sort of thing on women. Sexual assault, sexual harassment, the Me Too movement is very real, and I think that huge drop among Republican women has to have Republicans in a panic. And I don't know if Trump himself could really close that gap. And again, as you've noted, there's going to be more coming out with the press. People will be coming forward. So this is far from over. They're not going to be able to sweep it under the rug. I don't think it's something that's going to help them.
And as the back and forth has been going, the Republicans have accused the Democrats, especially on the Senate Judiciary Committee, of playing politics here, of potentially taking it too far. I want to play a little bit from Senator Lindsey Graham and his comments about that.
You're trying to portray him as a stumbling, bumbling drunk, gang rapist who during high school and college was Bill Cosby. 6 FBI background checks over the years would have uncovered this. What we will investigate is who in Dianne Feinstein's office referred Dr. Ford to Ms. Katz.
Scott, your reaction?
Yeah, you know, this whole narrative has been driven by the GOP. The Democrats have been put in this political prism, but the reality is that Dr. Ford has been telling this story since 2012, and she reached out to the Dems. She wanted to be anonymous, and it was only until it was leaked at the end of his nomination hearing, or towards the end, that the Dems then said, okay, we are where we are. Putting it in the political prism takes us away from what's really important in regard to Dr. Ford and a number of women, millions, if not hundreds of thousands, of wanting to get to the truth. And the Republicans seem like they just want this nomination approved. The Democrats want the truth. And all of the women who have suffered in silence in connection to sexual assault or sexual misconduct want the truth.
Yes.
If we get to the truth, then you vote on him. And if he gets in, he gets in. If he doesn't, he doesn't. But these women are still going to vote come November 6th. And I think they're going to be a big part of the blue wave.
Blue wave, Grace Rao. Is there a red wave, too? The question that's going to be asked for at least another 37 days is which side is more energized, right? Who's getting out the vote more?
Well, I think initially the Democrats seem to have the wind at their backs right now when it comes to Brett Kavanaugh. I mean, here in New York, we just had a Democratic primary for governor for a number of statewide offices. Turnout in that primary was more than double what it had been 4 years ago. And everyone, most Democrats, were crediting President Trump with that, saying, look, this is a result of the 2016 election. Democrats are so engaged. They are so energized. And that was before we were talking about Brett Kavanaugh and these allegations. So I have to think that there is going to be a lot of energy on the Democratic side. Obviously, there are some very specific Democratic senators who have a different set of political questions that and challenges they have to deal with in states that went with President Trump before. But I do think that the Democratic base is deeply energized, and I think women are going to play a key role in November.
You know, Kevin, when we look at the midterm egg timer, is it just too late for the Republicans to come forward with another nominee if this nominee, for some reason, does not come to pass? Is that potentially one of the bolts of energy that is pushing the Republican Party to push this particular nominee?
I think that's a great point. And in fact, when I talked with sources all last week up on Capitol Hill in both the Republican and the Democratic Party, they noted that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell would really like to see, first and foremost, this get voted on before October 1st when the Supreme Court reconvenes. That's now a moot issue. But then before the midterm elections. And that, you know, we're going to have to wait and see if that happens. But either way, if this were to happen in the lame duck session, then there becomes an even other type of political tumult, to put it mildly, that would emerge. But two quick points that I would make is that the next judge in line is Judge Amy Coney Barrett, and she's viewed largely as much more conservative on the issues of marriage equality, on the issues of abortion rights, than someone like Judge Kavanaugh. So that's another set that would be more problematic for centrist Republicans. And very quickly, I'd note just how the different types of Democrats that have been elected, that we've seen elected in the special elections, whether it's Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or someone like Connor Lamb, they're different types of Democrats.
Sherry, quickly. Sherry, quickly.
Look, I think that we're going to see other polls coming out. They're going to make it look very, very bad for Trump and for the Republicans. And once this goes, and we also know that Mark Judge wants to do this confidentially. Once things start coming out or people start making some pretty educated guesses that Judge is saying some things that are not favorable to Kavanaugh, I think it's entirely possible that Kavanaugh suddenly decides that he doesn't want to have anything to do with this. Remember, he's not a guy who's going to be talked to, because they know if he lied in front of the Senate, and they're confident he would lie to the FBI. And you know what happens then, and that's why Don McGahn wants to make sure that the FBI does not talk to Kavanaugh.
Richard, if I may jump in real quickly, it may not be about the Democrats or the Republicans on November 6th. Watch the independents, the suburban women, and those who are disgusted with Donald Trump and how the GOP Senate has handled this nomination, whether he gets in or whether he doesn't. I think the independents are going to be critical in every state and which way they vote. And my bet is they're going to vote with the Democrats.
All great points made by the four of you, Scott, Sherry, Kevin, and Grace. Thank you, and have a good Sunday.
Thank you, Richard.
All righty. Coming up.